I stood by the champagne table, watching Dean Ellison hold court with his investors. The guy was a stone-cold businessman, Navy man too, tight suit, sharp eyes, but there was no warmth in him, none at all. Not for me, not for anyone. He'd barely acknowledged me at my own graduation 2 weeks ago, let alone offered a word of congratulations. Now, here he was, hosting this ridiculous party for me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I glanced over and saw him pour a drink from a gold-labeled bottle. Then he turned slightly, slipped something white into the glass, and handed it off to a waiter. That's when my stomach twisted. I watched the waiter move through the crowd, then stop in front of me. My heart dropped as the glass came into view, the same cloudy swirl at the bottom. I didn't take it immediately. Instead, I stared at it, leaning in, sniffing. It didn't smell like alcohol. There was a slight bitterness to it, something chemical, something familiar. I wasn't a chemist, but I'd done HVAC work at a couple chemical plants. I knew the smell of lab waste. The waiter stood there, waiting for me to take the glass. Around me, people were laughing, chatting, but Celeste's eyes were locked on me. The woman never missed a thing, and as I looked at her, something hit me. This wasn't just a celebration. It was a setup. "Enjoying the party?" Celeste asked, her voice cutting through the murmur of the room. "Yeah, it's great," I muttered, then put the glass down on the nearest tray, taking a step back. My mind was racing. What were they trying to do? Poison me? Discredit me? All this was too calculated, too deliberate. I forced myself to blend back into the crowd, keeping my face neutral. Dean and Celeste had made it clear they didn't want me here. Just 2 weeks ago, they had called me a freeloader, a waste of space. Now they were throwing me a celebration. The only thing I could think of was that it wasn't a celebration for me. It was a celebration for them, of getting rid of me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep it together. There were too many people here, his investors, some military brass, people who didn't know me from Adam. If I made a scene now, it'd backfire. So I stayed cool, but the back of my mind kept spinning. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Jason, a text. "What's up?" I quickly typed back, "Get here, quiet, something's off." I needed someone in my corner who knew how to handle a situation like this. Jason had the right training. He'd been a Navy medic before going into private security. I slid the phone back into my pocket, then forced a smile when Rachel caught my eye from across the room. She flashed me a grin, like everything was fine. Was she in on it? Could she have known? I couldn't tell, not yet. But one thing was certain. Dean was up to something, and I wasn't about to take the bait. I tried to shake the nerves as I moved through the crowd, avoiding Dean's stare. He was the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to make you feel small, cold, calculating, his entire empire built on government contracts, mostly defense systems. I could almost see the gears turning behind his eyes, always thinking 5 steps ahead, always in control. Celeste wasn't much better. She came from old oil money, and her entire life screamed polished poison. She had that look, like she could tear someone apart and still ask for the check without breaking a sweat. She used to call my job at the auto shop playing dress-up in grease, like somehow working on engines made me less of a man. It used to sting. Now, it just pissed me off. But Rachel? She was their golden girl. Perfect grades, perfect life, perfect future, straight-A student, MBA from Wharton, all set to take over Ellison Technologies, the crown jewel in Dean's little empire. And then there was me, Marcus, the guy who didn't fit into their plans, the guy who wasn't supposed to be part of the picture. I remember the first time I met Dean. I was 21, and Rachel was in her rebel phase, deciding to marry some guy who had no business being in her world. I didn't fit their expectations, not even close. I told Dean I wanted to build eco-efficient engines, to make a dent in the world with something that actually mattered. He laughed in my face. "That's cute. Now go get a real engineering job." It was the first of many times I realized how much he looked down on me. At first, I thought Rachel might change him, soften him. But the longer we were together, the more I realized he wasn't interested in change. He wanted control. He didn't believe in second chances or second opinions, just the military mindset. Do what you're told and don't question it. The only one in that family who ever gave me a real chance was Rachel's grandfather, Walt. He was a retired chemist, rough around the edges, but wise. He once told me, "This family eats its own, son." Keep your own damn compass. Walt was the one who saw something in me, something no one else did. When he passed 2 years ago, I was barely scraping by. But he left me a letter and a trust, $9.5 million, locked until I finished my degree. It was a lifeline. Rachel didn't know about it, neither did her parents. They had no idea that, for all their judgment, I had something they couldn't touch. Not that I was going to tell them. I wasn't stupid enough to broadcast it. But then, 4 weeks before graduation, one of their family attorneys slipped up. That's when Dean found out. He went pale. I could see the color drain from his face the second he realized what I had: money, independence, a future beyond the life they had planned for me. I went from the rebel phase to a legitimate threat. Now, just weeks after, he was playing the gracious host, toasting to my future, to my success. It didn't add up. I wasn't buying it. Rachel came over to me, her smile all bright and proud. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her parents were acting like they were my biggest supporters, but everything they'd done up until this point told me they'd only been tolerating me for her sake, as long as I stayed in my place. Now that I was suddenly a threat, well, they'd have to figure out how to handle me. "Hey," Rachel said, leaning in close. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine," I lied. "You don't look fine. Is it the party?" "Maybe it's the company," I said, nodding toward her parents. Rachel chuckled, a nervous laugh. "I swear you're impossible." I wanted to ask her if she even knew what was going on behind closed doors, but I couldn't, not yet. I needed to figure out what they were really after before making a move, and I couldn't do that if I pissed off Rachel. But the longer I stayed in that room, the more I felt like a pawn in a game I wasn't meant to understand. Dean's voice cut through the crowd again, a booming laugh that carried across the ballroom. "Marcus, my boy!" He clapped me on the back, so hard I almost stumbled. "You've earned this. The future's yours." "The future's yours?" I could barely hold it together as I smiled, nodding along. "Appreciate it, Dean." Yeah, it was mine. But it wasn't going to come from their blessing. Not now, not ever. This was my life. I'd earned it. And if they thought I was just going to roll over and let them take it from me, they were in for a rude awakening. I slipped out of the ballroom, heading for the catering hallway. I needed space to breathe, away from the fake smiles and the ever-watchful eyes. As I walked, I kept my head low, hoping nobody would notice me sneaking off. The hallway was quiet, almost too quiet. I pushed open a door leading to a storage room, just trying to find some peace for a minute. But then I heard voices. Dean's voice. "You hear me?" he was saying. "He walks away with nearly 10 mil hours and no strings. After everything." I froze. My hand gripped the doorframe, every muscle tensing as the words hit me. My stomach churned. "He's dangerous now, Celeste," Dean continued. "He has money, independence. He's not going to sit back and let us control him." Celeste's voice cut in, tight and controlled. "It's not fatal," she said, like she'd rehearsed this. "Just makes him look sick, stomach bug. We call an ambulance, shift the trust to Rachel, his wife, while he's incapacitated." My pulse shot through my neck. They were talking about me, talking about poisoning me. "That's all it takes?" Dean asked. His tone was colder than ice. "We need him out of the picture before Thursday. That's when the trust disperses." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My mind was spiraling. My wife's parents weren't just setting me up to fail. They were setting me up to be out of the picture. They wanted me gone long enough to hijack my money. They were planning to drug me, make me look like I was having some medical crisis, then quietly hand everything over to Rachel. I barely made it out of that room without making a sound. My head was pounding. My legs felt like lead. I kept my back against the wall, my mind racing to process what I'd just overheard. They weren't just trying to sabotage me. They were trying to erase me. I could feel the weight of their plan on my chest. I didn't know how much of it Rachel was in on, but I had to assume she was, or at least she was going to be, whether she liked it or not. I needed to stay calm, stay smart. I wasn't going to let them take me down without a fight. I had no idea how much time I had left. Maybe I could still turn this around. Maybe I could play their game and still come out on top. I turned the corner back into the ballroom, forcing myself to act like nothing had changed, like everything was fine. I moved through the crowd, pretending I wasn't just about to walk into a minefield. And then I saw Rachel. She was across the room, smiling at me like everything was normal, like the night was still a celebration for my future. She looked proud of me, like she had no idea what was really happening. Did she know? Was she in on it? I couldn't tell. The worst part wasn't the plan they were trying to pull off. The worst part was not knowing if Rachel had any clue, not knowing if she was a part of this or just another pawn. I forced a smile and raised my glass, trying to stay in control. "Hey, babe," I said, walking toward her. "Everything all right?" Rachel smiled, but there was something off about it. Her eyes flickered toward my glass, then back at me. For a second, it felt like she was seeing something in me she hadn't before, something new, something dangerous. But maybe that was just me overthinking it. "Yeah," she said. "Everything's fine. I'm proud of you." The words felt hollow. Proud of me? For what? For standing here like an idiot, pretending I didn't know the family I'd married into was scheming to take me down? I smiled back, but the feeling of unease in my chest only grew stronger. It wasn't just the poison in my drink anymore. It was the uncertainty about Rachel. Could I trust her? Did she even know what her parents were planning? Or was she already too far gone to see the truth? I didn't know, but I was damn sure going to find out. Dean walked toward me with a glass from that gold label bottle, the same cloudy swirl at the bottom. I could feel the weight of it in my hands before he even offered it. The smell still clung to me, and I felt a wave of disgust rise up. I wasn't touching it. Not yet. "To Marcus," Dean said, his voice smooth, too smooth. "Our son-in-law, the graduate. May he make choices that don't disappoint us forever." I bit back a laugh at that. Disappoint him? Hell, I'd be lucky if I wasn't already on the shit list. I smiled instead, forcing it out, and took the glass from him. "Appreciate it, Dean." I didn't take a sip. I held the glass, studied it. I watched Rachel across the room, clinking her glass with Celeste. She caught my eye, and for a second I saw something. Maybe concern, maybe confusion. I couldn't tell. "Before we drink," I said, louder than I meant to. The room fell quiet, the attention shifting. I saw Dean's lips tighten, but I didn't care. "I want to toast Rachel, my wife. Wouldn't have made it without her." The words came out sharp, too sharp, but I didn't care. I took a step toward her, meeting her halfway. She looked surprised as I smoothly swapped glasses with her. One fluid motion, no hesitation. She blinked like she wasn't sure what just happened, but didn't resist. "Here," I said, handing her the glass that was supposed to be mine. "The good stuff's for you." Her eyes flicked to the glass in her hand, and then back at me, but she didn't say anything. Dean's hand froze in midair. Celeste's fingers tightened around her champagne flute. I could see them both tensing, the realization hitting them just as I locked eyes with Dean. "To family," I said, raising my glass. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even an invitation. It was a statement. Rachel smiled, a little unsure but going along with it. "To family," she echoed, taking a deep sip from the glass I'd handed her. I watched her swallow, and I could see the way she tried to play it off, like everything was normal. But it wasn't. I brought the glass to my lips, pretending to take a sip, but I didn't swallow. I needed to be sure. I needed to know if I'd made the right move. I saw Rachel move through the crowd a few minutes later, chatting with her friends. She was laughing, playing the part of the happy wife. But there was something off in her step. She blinked, swayed slightly, then steadied herself. "Rachel?" one of her friends asked, her voice full of concern. "You okay?" "Just dizzy," Rachel said, brushing it off. "Weird. I don't know. Something's not right." Before I could even make my way over to her, she collapsed, just like that. Right there on the dance floor, in front of everyone. The laughter died instantly. The room went from a buzz to dead silence. My heart stopped. My breath hitched. I moved toward her quickly, instinctively, but I knew. I knew what was happening. "Rachel!" I shouted, kneeling beside her. She was out cold, her body limp. Her skin felt warm, but there was something off about it, something not right. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. "What the hell is going on?" someone yelled. I wasn't sure who. It didn't matter. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, but I pushed it down, focusing. I reached for her pulse, keeping my voice steady. "Call an ambulance, now." I couldn't look at her parents. I couldn't look at Dean, who was standing frozen in the middle of the crowd, staring at me like he was watching a play. Celeste, too, her face a mask of perfect concern. But I knew better. This was no accident. This was exactly what they had planned. Rachel's friend was already dialing her phone, but I didn't wait. I pulled out my own phone, texted Jason quickly, "Get here, she's down." They tried it. I didn't know how much time I had. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't let them get away with this. I couldn't let them use Rachel to cover their tracks. The door to the ballroom opened, and I heard sirens in the distance. I rode with her in the ambulance. My hands were clammy as I kept my eyes on Rachel, watching for any signs of movement. The sirens screamed around us, but inside the back of the ambulance, everything was unnervingly quiet. "Do a talk screen," I told the medics, my voice flat, controlled. I think she was drugged. They didn't hesitate, starting the IV drip and adjusting her oxygen mask. Rachel's body was limp, her pulse weak but steady. My stomach was tight, but I focused on the facts. I needed the truth. I needed proof. At the ER, they moved her quickly, and I hovered by the door, pacing, waiting for answers. The doctors worked fast, but I could see the concern on their faces. They finally pulled me aside when they'd stabilized her. "We've got cardiovascular stress, nausea, mild hallucinations," the ER doc said, glancing over his shoulder at the machines beeping in the background. "Looks like a lab-grade anticholinergic." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. "Check for cyclopentolate analogs. Her dad works with compounds like that." The doctor gave me a sharp look, like he wasn't sure whether to be impressed or annoyed, but he didn't argue. "We'll send the samples for analysis." I turned to Jason, who had slipped in through the ER entrance, looking sharp as usual in his jeans and jacket. He was the Navy medic I trusted with my life, and right now, I needed him more than ever. He nodded at me, his jaw tight. "Anything?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, leaning in. "I've got the footage, the whole thing. Dean handing you that glass, the switch. You're right, they were setting you up." I pulled out my phone, showing him the video of Dean slipping something into the drink. Jason's expression didn't change. He was used to seeing things like this, but even he couldn't mask the disgust in his eyes when he saw the footage. "Good," I said. "Get that to Detective Reese. The sooner we get the ball rolling, the sooner we can hit them with everything." Before he could respond, a tall guy in a dark suit entered the room. Detective Reese. His eyes immediately locked onto mine. "Marcus?" "Yeah," I said, shoving my phone into his hand. "They tried to poison me. She drank my glass instead." Reese nodded without hesitation, watching the video Jason had recorded. "This is solid," he said. "We'll start an investigation." I let out a breath, trying to keep my composure. My wife was still unconscious, and the people who were supposed to care about me, the ones who were supposed to love me, had tried to take me out. The whole thing was sickening, but I couldn't let myself break down, not yet. There was too much at stake. Rachel didn't wake up until late that night. She was weak, her skin clammy, and her eyes were bleary, like she had been through something that didn't quite make sense. "What happened?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. She looked at me like she was still trying to piece it together. I could see the confusion in her eyes. "You drank from my glass," I said, the words feeling heavier than they should have. I wasn't sure what I expected, but the silence that followed felt like a punch to the gut. She stared at me, the shock settling in. "Wait, you think my parents—" "I heard them, Rachel. It wasn't hearsay," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I heard them planning it. I overheard them talking about drugging me, about making me look sick so they could take control of everything. The trust, the money, everything." Her gaze shifted and she looked away, like she couldn't handle the weight of what I was saying. "I don't know what to believe, Marcus," she whispered, her voice shaking just slightly. I felt a knot form in my chest. She was my wife. She was supposed to be in this with me. But the way she avoided looking at me, the way she seemed distant, it told me everything I needed to know. "I'm not asking you to believe me, Rachel," I said, quieter now. "I'm just telling you the truth. Your parents, they're not who you think they are." She flinched, like my words had hit her harder than I realized. She sat up a little, her hands trembling as she reached for her water bottle, but she didn't drink. "I'm sorry," she whispered, more to herself than to me. I never knew. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo what had already been done. The trust was locked up, and her parents had already made their move. It was too late to go back. Within 2 days, the FBI raided Ellison Tech headquarters. It felt like the world was starting to crack open, piece by piece. The poisoning was the spark, the catalyst they needed to dig deeper, Dean and Celeste hadn't just been manipulating me, they'd been covering up years of illegal activity. I didn't know how deep the rot went until the feds found it. Files, emails, altered trial data, environmental violations from the West Ridge site. Turns out Rachel's parents had been dumping chemical waste into a protected watershed for years. And Dean, his personal lab was flagged. That same compound that had been in Rachel's bloodstream, it was found in his office fridge, tucked away like a damn trophy. The FBI's findings opened everything up. What had seemed like an isolated incident, a simple poisoning attempt, turned into a full-scale investigation. Dean's tech company, his empire built on shady government contracts, was falling apart. The feds were picking through every corner of it. Rachel was discharged from the hospital a day later. She wasn't the same. She looked like she was still trying to make sense of everything, but there was this distance in her eyes, like she wouldn't acknowledge the full scope of what her parents had done. She moved in with her cousin in Bloomington, far from the mess. I didn't blame her for getting out, but I didn't think it was out of a desire to protect herself. It was just easier to escape, to shut out the truth. She called once. I was standing in the middle of my new office when her name popped up on my phone. I stared at it for a minute before answering. Hello? Marcus? I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything, she said, her voice small, like she was trying to hold it together. I didn't know how to respond. There was nothing to say that would make any of this better. I don't know what to say to that, Rachel. I really don't. I know, she said quietly. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't expect that. But I wanted you to know I didn't know. I didn't know about any of it. I could feel her pain on the other side of the line, but it was too late. There was no coming back from this. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the silence between us, the way she had never truly taken a stand, her indecision spoke volumes. It doesn't matter now, I said, my voice flat. What matters is that you can't keep pretending it's not happening. Your parents, they're not who you think they are. I know, she whispered. I don't know what to believe anymore. And that was it. The call ended quietly. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. Detective Reese was already working the case full time. He told me the video and the talk screen were more than enough to hold Dean and Celeste. I'd given him everything he needed, and he was running with it. But even as the walls closed in on them, Rachel stayed silent. She didn't testify, didn't take a side. She couldn't, not without acknowledging everything she'd been blind to for so long. A week later, the trust fund transferred to me officially. The money was mine now, the one thing they hadn't been able to take away. The Ellison name meant nothing to me anymore. It had turned into a symbol of greed, corruption, and betrayal, but it meant something to others. It meant something to the media. I went public with everything. No drama, no theatrics, just the facts. The Ellison family tried to poison me, I said, standing in front of a camera for the first time in my life. I'm telling my story because the truth needs to be heard. The story hit hard, but I wasn't here for the media circus. I didn't care about the attention. I just wanted people to know what had happened, what kind of people had been running that company. My focus wasn't on revenge. It was on the truth. Dean and Celeste were already on the defensive, their lawyers scrambling to keep them out of prison. But the evidence was overwhelming. The FBI had done their job, and it was only a matter of time before the legal hammer came down. I didn't need to watch them fall. I didn't need to savor their downfall. What mattered was that I was finally free. Free from their control. Free to build my own life, on my own terms. And that's exactly what I did. The trial made headlines. Defense tycoon accused of poison plot was the headline that flashed across every major news outlet. The whole country was watching, and I felt like I was right in the middle of a storm. Dean and Celeste didn't give a damn about what they'd done. No remorse, no apology. Just cold, calculating self-preservation. Their lawyer painted me as the ungrateful son-in-law, the one who'd gone off script, betrayed the family. The nerve of it. I was just the pawn they were trying to get rid of. But I wasn't their pawn anymore. The evidence was undeniable. The video Jason had taken, the one showing Dean slipping something into my glass, was clear as day. The lab results proved Rachel had been drugged with the same compound. And then the FBI report on the West Ridge site, detailing the illegal chemical dumping, sealed their fate. Dean pled out. 22 years for attempted manslaughter, fraud, and environmental crimes. I don't think he cared about the sentence. It was the kind of thing he'd just chalk up as a bump in the road. He'd always thought he was above consequences. Celeste got 15 for conspiracy. She sat in the courtroom, stone-faced the entire time, not even bothering to flinch when the judge read the verdict. She was a survivor in her mind, a cold survivor, the kind that doesn't care who gets trampled along the way. But Rachel had to testify, reluctantly. Her eyes were hollow, like she was already somewhere else, disconnected. She claimed she didn't know anything about her parents' plan, about the illegal activities, about the trust. She claimed she was in the dark. I wanted to believe her. Part of me still did. But the text didn't lie. She'd been briefed on the trust. She'd signed early transfer documents. They were in black and white. It wasn't just hearsay anymore. The world could see her for what she was, complicit, if not directly, then by turning a blind eye. The judge let her off, a slap on the wrist. No jail time, no consequences. But the world saw her clearly for the first time. She couldn't hide behind her perfect image anymore. It was all out in the open. Ellison Technologies tanked. I watched as the stock plummeted 90%. The government froze their contracts, just like I knew they would. It was a domino effect. The public knew now. The ones who had been investing in Dean's empire started bailing out, pulling their money as fast as they could. It was over for them. Over for that entire corrupt empire. The family, what was left of it, shattered. I'd taken everything they'd tried to take from me, and more. They'd wanted control, and they'd thought they could get away with it. But in the end, it was me who walked away with something real. Rachel tried to contact me a few times after the trial. She sent a text a week after the verdict. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't respond. It felt pointless. What was there to say? The silence between us was too thick, too heavy. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. She was still their daughter, no matter what had come to light. I moved on. I had to. I used part of the trust to start something real. Jason and I launched a clean energy firm. It was my shot at doing things right. The kind of business I'd always dreamed about, not something built on weapons or government contracts. We focused on efficiency, sustainability, making things that didn't destroy the world, but tried to fix it. We didn't just hire engineers either. We hired veterans, ex-felons, people who needed a second chance. They came with skills, but they also came with baggage. That didn't matter. They needed jobs. They needed an opportunity. We gave them both, and in return, they busted their asses. We started small, buying an old auto shop and turning it into a lab and garage. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. I wasn't about to touch anything tied to defense, not after everything with the Ellisons. We didn't build weapons. We didn't sell to the military. I'd had enough of that world. What I built here was different, real, clean. It felt good to wake up every morning knowing I wasn't part of a system that tore people down. The $9.5 million didn't just get me a business. It got me the freedom to make a difference. I donated $2.5 million to a nonprofit working to clean up water systems near the Ellison waste site. It was a small gesture in the grand scheme of things, but it felt like the right one. Maybe it wouldn't fix everything, but it would make sure those waters didn't stay poisoned. I kept Walt's letter framed above my desk. Keep your compass. It was the only thing he'd left me, the only piece of advice that had ever really mattered. That's how I kept going. Rachel tried calling once, a few months after the trial. I saw her name flash on my phone. I almost picked up. I almost let her in, but I didn't. I couldn't. I sent a text instead. Too late. I didn't hear from her again after that, and I didn't care. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. The truth was out. The family was done. The trust had been settled. I wasn't about to pretend like anything was going to change. I had something real now, something that couldn't be taken from me. I wasn't bound by their world anymore, and I didn't need to keep looking back. It felt like a clean break, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. A year later, I stood at the podium of a regional engineering summit, giving a talk on small engine efficiency for rural power systems. Nothing fancy, no flashy slides, no tech jargon designed to impress, just the basics. The stuff that actually mattered. The kind of things I'd spent the past year working on. Solutions that could help real people in real places. I looked out at the crowd. It was full of regular folks. Engineers, mechanics, farmers, business owners, people who didn't care about power suits or boardrooms. Just people who wanted to make something work, build something that mattered. Jason was in the front row, nodding along with the rest of them, his ever-present support. My crew sat behind him, their faces eager, not because they were impressed with me, but because they were invested in the work we were doing together. There was no one famous, no one fake, just real people building something honest. I wasn't looking for accolades. I wasn't trying to prove a point to anyone anymore. This was my life now, and I was damn proud of it. After the talk, I stepped outside to get some air. The cold hit me immediately. It was early in the morning, and the world was still half asleep, but I welcomed it. The sharp bite of the air was a reminder that I'd made it through the worst of it. I'd lost my marriage. I'd lost the life I thought I was supposed to have. Hell, I nearly lost my future, but I came out the other side, alive, and with something real. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need to watch Dean or Celeste rot in prison. I didn't need to prove I was better than them. The truth was enough. It was always enough. The truth about what they were. The truth about who I was becoming. The Ellison name? It meant greed, fraud, and manipulation now. That was their legacy, not mine. My name? It was still a work in progress, but it was mine. It stood for something I could be proud of, something I was building on my terms. No one could take that from me. For every man who's ever been underestimated, used, or betrayed by the people who were supposed to have your back, just know you can walk away. You can. You don't have to stay stuck in their game. You don't have to play by their rules. You can build something they can't touch. That's what I did. That's what I'm doing. And no matter how hard they tried to break me, they couldn't take that away.